So, welcome everyone to this edition of HappierMe Live. And today we're going to be talking about how we can communicate with clarity, courage, and kindness, and why all three are really important. My guest to explore this is my long-term collaborator and friend, John D. Whitus from Atlanta in Georgia. John D., welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back, and I'm excited to talk to all these wonderful people I've just been introduced to.
Yes. So the plan is that John D and I will speak for half an hour or so, and we'd welcome your comments in the chat as we're traveling. And at the end, we'd welcome your contributions and what you think about this topic. And of course, we will record it and share it with everyone. So, John D, let's get started. My first question: why should we bother? Right? It's pretty obvious, but let's spell it out. Why is communication so important?
Well, as a human design person who has communication big in their chart, I can tell you I believe that this subject is close to me because it's a part of my purpose. But it's important for everyone, I think, because I believe everything about humanity is relational. And
Yes.
therefore, it's about connection. And
Yeah.
if we're not connecting, we can't possibly be at our best.
No. And I suppose communication determines our success in our relationships, at work, in ourselves. But here's the intriguing thing: 60 to 80% of communication is nonverbal. And
Absolutely.
we're going to unpick that if we can in this conversation and see and figure out what is that uh, nonverbal bit that we need to understand and master, you know? Okay.
I do think once we understand that, we can arrange ourselves differently, right? Consciously,
Yes.
differently. But I'd even heard that there was more than that on nonverbal communication. And I think that was shored up by NLP and other things I've met along the way that speak to how humans think, communicate, etc. And from energy work, which is where most people know me from, all of us can agree, I think, that we have felt the energy of a room, of
Yes.
a person before they open their mouth. Sometimes
Yes.
before they come into the room, it's like a whoosh of something that it's ineffable. You can't quite put words to it, but you
Yes.
can feel it. And
Yes.
you're unconsciously acknowledging that, right? So all of those nonverbals, we're going to, I think, profit from being more aware of.
Yes.
And secondly, then putting that to work in consciously communicating. And of course, you had me at hello when you asked me because you said courage and kindness. And
Yes.
I went, oh, yeah, that's
Both
my
of them.
lane.
Right. Right. And I suppose I think for myself, I wish I'd been taught this skill when I was a young man. You know, nobody ever regarded it as important to teach us how to communicate. And I think so many of my challenges could have been avoided or handled differently. And I'm sure that's true for all of us in some capacity.
I think so too. And as I got more used to it, this is speaking to education and young people, because some of our people here are involved in that, is no one taught them how, as
Mm.
you said, Manoj. And one of the things I think I've learned over time to tell them and investigate, because today we're very much more in exploratory, right?
Yes.
Is how you say something determines for a very large part your outcome.
Absolutely. And of course, now in the age of AI, where it's creating all this anxiety around jobs and so on, these are the skills that will help you navigate that world better. Because we all grew up thinking knowledge is our vehicle for jobs and success. But
Mhm.
AI is going to take that role. So what's going to really make you stand out is how you communicate. And of course, it links directly to our relationships, right? Okay, let's dive in now, John Day. What actually happens when we listen to each other? What's
When
the
we really
mechanics of
listen. I
listening?
think that's what we're talking about. When we really listen,
Yes.
right?
What's going on in our
Um,
mind in this process? Let's break it down into small bits. What happens when we listen to each other?
well, a couple of things. One, I think we attune ourselves to really listening, to receiving all
Mm.
that from the person. So
Mm.
it's a decision. And with time, you said skills, it becomes an unconscious skill that we launch. Oh, it's time to listen
Yes.
because we've embodied and embedded that, right? But what happens is in my book, and I'm not speaking scientifically because I don't have those creds, but
Mm.
we open and become permeable. We open and become more patient in our pace because we are actually doing the art of listening,
That's if
not
we're
thinking
listening
what I'm
well,
going to
right,
say,
Gandhi?
right?
That's if we're listening well. But most of the time, people don't listen well and they're just distracted. They're thinking about something else while someone's
Mhm.
talking. But I wanted to go
I,
back to basics. So when someone says something, that word is translated into meaning in my mind.
yes.
The meaning I give that word is different to the meaning that was intended by the other person. But I don't see that.
Often.
I mean, love is
Often.
a good word, right? It has so many different meanings for different people,
Indeed.
So just to be aware. And then, of course, the meaning comes from my memory, right? So my conditioning is different to
Mhm.
yours.
Absolutely. We are designed to find patterns and make meaning. That doesn't mean that's correct. It doesn't mean that even if it is correct, that it goes outside of our sphere, our tiny little sphere,
Yes,
to
yes.
another. Right?
And then this word that you've told me triggers in me a whole set of sequence of thoughts. And as soon as that happens, I've stopped listening to you because I'm focused on that. And then what am I going to say next? And I'm going to interrupt you. And even in this conversation, you can watch yourselves. This is what's going on. We formulate an answer, we interrupt, we speak over. And of course, all this creates feelings as well, right? Every word
Indeed.
creates a feeling. So suddenly you're not only dealing with all the thoughts that are arising, but the feelings that are
Yeah,
being triggered at the same time. Um,
absolutely. And then that's before we even get to cultural differences,
yes,
right?
yes, yes, all that.
So that's just an entirely different overlay on top of that,
Yes.
right?
And of course, we're listening to the tone. So we're reacting not just to the word, but to the tone and maybe to the body language and that mysterious energy word that you used, someone's energy, we all feel it, but we just can't measure it. So we ignore it, if you know what I mean.
Well, I like what you've laid out because you're showing a table full of elements
Yes.
at work, largely unconscious to us, but we're making it conscious today of all the things at work when we even think we're going to be listening,
Yes.
much less actually listening.
Yes. It's so interesting. And, when I'm thinking, I can't listen. That's what I've discovered. See, if I go to a concert and I'm listening to some music,
Mhm.
I realize my mind tunes in and out of that music. That means I'm listening, I can hear the orchestra playing or song playing, and then suddenly
Sure.
I've lost it because I'm thinking about something. Just play around with that in your own mind and you'll realize how
Mhm.
when you're thinking, you stop listening. So really, if we want to listen well, we need a mind that's quiet. You see, it's so clear, right? When we want to
Yes.
listen well, we need a mind that's quiet. Okay, let's move on. Now, why do you think we prefer to speak rather than listen? It's fairly universal, right? We've all met people who just speak incessantly without any insight that this is what's going on,
Mhm.
that they're completely hogging the conversation. They've never asked a single question about you at all. Why do you think
Indeed.
that happens?
Well, there's so many reasons, especially now. One, it's a very noisy world we live in, all of
Mm,
us, you know.
mm.
Two, it gives us the illusion of maintaining control. And a noisy world makes us often feel out of control.
Right.
So it might allay our anxiety or whatever is going on
Mm,
with us from the noisy world to dominate or to
mm.
control where it's going to go. That might give the illusion of giving myself a little peace or safety, perhaps.
Yes, yes.
Right? And again, we're talking about unconsidered
And
type
it's
of listening. We're not
unconscious, all
talking about
this.
real listening. Yeah.
It's unconscious, right? So you said two really important things. One is talking about myself makes me feel good. It,
Mm.
polishes up my ego. Someone listening to me and my jokes and my stories and my,
Right. Hmm.
achievements, but it's also about control, as you said, very subtly.
Hmm.
And if you're anxious person, then talking is a way of relieving that anxiety in yourself. So I know someone who's quite close to me who I know privately is very anxious. But
Hmm.
when that same person is in a social gathering, nobody could ever tell because,
Yes.
he is talks a lot and, all of that. And it just
Well,
covers
they're
that
in a
up, right?
performative they're in a performative place there. They are showing
Performative
you
place.
what
Yes.
they wish to show you, right?
Yes.
And so please don't interrupt my performance. Right?
Yes, yes, yes. Some people speak as a performance. Hey, Suzanne, welcome. Nice to see you.
Hi.
Hey,
Sorry I'm late.
no, no, no. Good to see you. Uh,
Life.
uh, uh, okay. Well, it's
So,
been
so that
ages.
type of thing often is a mask, is a defense mechanism for people in answer to your question,
It's a
right?
defense
But still, we're not
mechanism.
getting to conscious listening, open that kind of openness, are we?
Yes. So, okay. So, all right. So, how can we listen better now that we've mapped out what happens when we
Mhm.
listen? And we've said one of the important things was to listen with a quiet mind,
Mhm.
which is not reactive, not easily triggered, and you're giving people real attention, right? And besides the obvious things, we said we would talk about that. Do you want to start?
Well, I think so, because what we're edging on to is a prepared to listen
Yes.
state, right? That doesn't always happen. We're not always prepared to listen. We're not always taking the opportunity to prepare to listen. But in these days and times, we might call it regulate before we relate, right?
Ah, interesting. Okay. I like
But
that.
we don't always have that time or take that time. So I
Hmm.
recognize in a perfect world, yeah, but I don't think we live in that.
Yeah. And also how we scan conversations, I noticed, to find something that's of interest to us. And
Mhm.
if it's interesting, I'll tune in. And if it's not
Mhm.
interesting, I'm going to tune out and think about, something else. So I think the quiet mind, and I think the other thing is to listen for the meaning behind the words being spoken.
Yeah.
Someone might be talking about the weather or something quite innocuous, but
Right.
actually, if you're sensitive, and this is what we mean by listening with sensitivity, is so important. You can be aware of what they're feeling or what they're not able to say, and that's a
Right.
real skill in life.
And that is clearly a desire you're acting on at that point. It
Yes.
really is. I'm listening to find out what is between the words or
Yes.
the lines.
Mm.
I'm taking in all of them to add up, almost like our insula in the brain. I'm trying to amalgamate all this into what can I make of this person, this idea, this conversation,
Yes.
right?
What about the role of curiosity, John D,
Mm.
when you're listening?
I do believe it becomes, if it's not already in your personal wheelhouse of things you like, you can develop more of it by deciding to be more interested in other people. And beside, you can teach yourself how to have a better level of curiosity. But for those of us that were born that way, it's a good conversation simply because I don't think we ever asked that question of ourselves. We just are curious,
Yes.
right? But often we look at that curiosity that is, let's call it learned. And some people are curious because they want to know something, they have an agenda, right?
Mm.
It can be a good one or a bad one, and who's to say? But they want something, right? It can also be seeking to find someone who will agree with me, right? So I'm curious to know if you're my kind of person or you're my
Right.
kind of like-mindedness,
Yes. Yes.
right?
But as
And
a
so
as a
there's lots
rule
of
now,
lots of good and
sorry,
bad
go
ways
on.
for that.
Sorry, go on, John D. No,
I'm
I
sorry.
said as a rule now,
Mhm.
Every time someone finishes speaking, I
Mhm.
ask a question about what they've just said,
Mhm.
almost without fail. I say, okay, can you help me understand that better or help me? And
Mhm.
it's just improved the quality of all my conversations.
And I believe what you're telegraphing, let's use that old-fashioned word, what you're telegraphing to them is, I'm interested.
Yes, I care, you know. I think caring and comes from listening. And by the way, for me, the litmus test for me is conversations with my two sons. They tell me very quickly what's working and not working. And I think this element of curiosity and just asking them has just been really, really helpful. And I can be absolutely sure that they're not going to listen to this podcast, so it's fine. I can talk about them.
I won't tell. I won't tell. I do think that that curiosity factor, though, that can be grown
Yeah.
is chief amongst making conversations more meaningful to
Mm,
both of you, to creating or fostering a better connection between you, even if you don't agree on something.
mm,
Both parties can feel seen, heard, encountered, held.
mm.
So I really think there's a lot of room for curiosity in this day and time
Yes.
for those reasons.
And I also, the Lakota tribe in North America had this beautiful custom where if somebody finished speaking, there would always be a short pause before anyone else spoke.
Yes.
And I've tried to bring that into my
Mhm.
dialogues with people. So when someone finishes speaking, I just let them
Yes.
finish.
Well, I think there's two things going on there. I have Lakota friends, and I'm thinking anew about our conversations right now. But a couple of things happen. One, I think you're able to attend, let
Mm,
it land, soak it in, really kind of
mm.
consider. Two, I think they feel that you have done that, that
Yes,
you are taking it in, taking it seriously,
yes,
respectfully would be a better word here,
yes,
right? And three, I think it gives everyone a skosh of room, another old-fashioned word, just a skosh of room, a little air, and instead of they're showing me like ping pong.
yes, 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 yes. So important, John Lee. Now, somebody else pointed out the other day that our self-interest is always operating in the background when we're listening to anyone. What can this
Mhm.
person do for me? What can I get from this person? We're
Mhm.
not saying it's right or wrong, but it's unconscious.
Mhm.
And you can find if it's unconscious, people are kind of how they're manipulating that conversation either to talk about themselves or to get something they want. And of course,
Mhm.
we sense that, right? We sense that somebody's not really listening, they're just out to get something for themselves. And that it
Yeah,
spoils the quality of that encounter or it affects that quality of that relationship, right? It's just to be aware of it, you think.
absolutely. And I think, like you said, it's unconscious, and we can't stop a certain kind of that. And that's because we are designed to unconsciously say friend or foe,
Mm.
safe or no, before going forward. Whether we're moving closer in or we're asking a question or we're maintaining eye contact, etc. That's what's going on in our design, first of all. So, secondly, once we've determined and we're moving in to that, leaning in is a popular parlance for that, right? Leaning into a conversation. Then I think that skosh of room that you were giving also becomes our friend because it allows us to be more considerate of what it is we would like from this. Would we like a connection? Would we like to know more about them? Would we like their company to hire us? Would we like to know their position on politics or how they know the host so I can navigate that?
Yes.
Anything is possible.
Yes. I think for me, it's just about being aware. And then once I'm aware, I know that I'm not going to manipulate this conversation or this
Mm,
person to get what I want.
mm.
I'm going to be
That,
honest about whatever it is. So it's straight up. So someone doesn't feel manipulated in a way
mhm.
or
Mhm.
that I'm ringing you just to say hi and I'm going to ask you about you and flatter you, but actually underneath it, I'm looking for something from you, and you'll pick that up a mile away. And but
Sure.
it's so much better if I just say, John D, can I'm ringing you because this is what I'm looking for, and and so on. All right.
Sure.
Okay. And I think lastly about listening better is to be conscious of how it's making you feel.
Mm.
Because if someone is speaking to you and is getting you agitated slowly,
Mhm.
and if we're not aware of that, then that agitation is going to communicate itself non-verbally, right, to the other person. Um, and I think this is something very subtle that I often don't pick up myself. And but when I do, it's really helpful in any conversation to be
Yes.
aware of how this conversation is making me feel. So I could
Yeah.
then consciously say, hey, let's talk about this tomorrow. Or I'll say, hey, this is making me agitated or something. Then it's on the
Yeah.
table, especially in close relationships, I think.
Sure. Well, that pump the brakes and take a pause is a wonderful habit to have in this world,
Yes, yes,
regardless of who you're talking to, because if you are unregulated or feel yourself becoming very dysregulated, it happens very quickly. You revert back to patterns of
yes,
defense,
yes,
basically, coping
yes,
and defense. And that's just kind of destined not to go as well as it might.
yes,
So that's a great habit to teach people to learn, but it also means that you have to, I think, own your discomfort.
yes, yes, yes. Okay. Moving on from listening now, let's talk about speaking. How can we speak with more care?
Mm. Well, firstly, I think I'm gonna just reflect back to this idea of intention, right?
Mm,
When we were talking about intentionally listening and speaking and conversation, w- being more clear and more honest
mm,
about your intention for the outcome of that,
right,
I think
right.
is always a good start. And then for those of us who are very body-based, somatic regulation fans, I I'm especially going to attend to that before I show up, if at all possible, because I want to show up as my best, most grounded, regulated me.
Such an interesting
Um,
point, John D, you made there, that
yeah.
we rarely do that. We
Mm,
rarely say, I'm going to go and do some tapping, breathing, whatever. I'm just going to feel really calm before I enter this conversation. I'm going to prepare for this
yes.
conversation. We never ever do that or rarely do that, prepare.
Well, I think we learn that we can and that things turn out better. And from what I've observed, humans like to repeat what felt good.
Okay, that's really good point. And then for me, it's also pausing and asking, how is this going to be received?
Mm, mhm.
Is this a good
Yes.
time to speak? Is this the person in the right mood? I'm in the right mood. You know,
Mhm.
do I need to say anything? And quite often, I'm realizing when I ask myself that question, 5 times out of 10, I don't need to say anything, because nobody's really
That's
interested in what me saying
great.
anything. They just want me
Yeah,
to listen to them.
right. And that brings up something really important from the past. A friend had called, a work friend, but
Hmm.
someone I knew quite well. And I had been called out by her, and roughly, I have to say, and saying, I do not want you to fix anything. I want you to shut up and listen.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And that did not feel good. But you know what? It was very clear. And we had enough of a foundation of a friendship in the past to build on so I could recuperate, recover, and say, excuse me, I didn't understand that. And now I do. Please tell me, and I'll listen.
S-
It was a big deal because then I could transfer that skill to other people and I could call up you and Manoj, I'm really upset about something, but do me a favor. Let me just talk and talk and talk. And then I'm going to ask you what you think, okay?
Yeah. But
So that pre-frame helps a lot.
we go one step further. And now I've learned, my sons are my best teachers. So now I ask them, what would you like me to do?
Mm.
Do you want me to just listen?
Mhm.
or do you want me to make a suggestion? And I'll tell you, John, the 8 times out of 10, when I ask that question, people just say, I want you to just listen. You know? And actually asking kids that question makes them feel respected, heard.
Mhm.
It completely
Absolutely.
transforms that reactive to and fro that we often have,
Exactly.
with people we're close to, right?
Agreed. And especially when with children, children are really important to me and you,
Yes.
especially when you're with them. The idea that I am not going to handle this as a forensic interview or download or intervention with you, because
Mm.
they often get that for many, many reasons. But if you say even your pre-frame back to them, I can tell you've got a lot to say. How about do I just listen? Would that be good right now? That lets them know what you're safe.
And by the way, you do that with 5-year-old children too, if you're a parent.
Yes, absolutely.
It,
Especially.
it transforms your relationship. Okay, two more things about speaking, and then we'll move on. One is about
Yeah,
tone, as you say, so important, and
absolutely.
the last thing is about watch out for this automatic criticism,
Mhm.
because often in close relationships, we're on autopilot. We're always criticizing kids, spouses,
Right.
close friends, siblings, or we're criticizing them in our mind if we're at work. And
And
again,
when that
that
happens,
communicates.
Manoj, to your point, when that happens, our facial body language,
Mm,
our vagal nerve has kicked in or not, right? Our facial body language lets them know, even if you didn't say that.
yes.
And, our phrase for that is, oh, Jonda, you don't have a poker face. Quite true. I do not, right? I'm aware, though, that I can telegraph what I feel or I'm thinking or how I'm holding that. So that too is a learned skill for speaking and listening. And I used to, I'm laughing now to myself because I taught some Lakota children with a little window, a paper with a little window, and I went up and down the face as they heard different things so they could see the judgments that they were making,
Ah.
whether it was about safety or judgment or agreement or friendly. And it was a great moment to be able to show people, instead of just preach at them, show people how that works so that then they can take that in and go try that out, right? It's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
You said something really beautiful, which is our thoughts are telegraphing themselves to other people,
Mhm.
even if we haven't opened our mouth, right?
True.
So you think just because you haven't said anything, nobody knows what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
But,
Which is hilarious, right?
yeah, but just to wake up and realize that your thoughts, so you've got to have, yeah, what you want to communicate, your thoughts are going to tell the story anyway. So you've got to be careful.
Absolutely.
Okay. What about understanding? So many misunderstandings occur all the time. How can we improve our understanding?
The easiest way I know is to neutrally reflect it back.
Hmm,
I want to make sure that I heard this the exactly what you meant. Can
hmm.
I repeat that back to you? You simply reflect it back, and they will then have an opening, a safe opening, to say, no, or that's not what I said, or what I really meant was, and they can self-correct in the moment. So that little pivot point makes a successful conversation generally of understanding versus a near miss or a blue angels. We just go our different ways because obviously we don't understand each other,
So,
all that stuff.
one question I often ask is so, just to repeat back, help me understand what you really mean by that. Because if I just react to the words, I'm going to miss the meaning.
Right.
You see, and quite
And,
often I
and
see in conversations, people are just reacting to what you say, I say, and it's a reactive conversation, not a intentional one with space, as you said, where you're really understanding people.
indeed. And I have to say, the more I learn, the more there is to learn, more people teach you, right? And now I would be inclined to say something that you're aiming at, but I probably would say it this way. I'd say, May I understand that better? I would really
Mm,
like to do that instead of what you really mean, might just telegraph to them, you're not really very clear. And I think, you don't really know how to express yourself. And all that stuff I didn't mean comes into play. So literally meeting them where they are, but in a very clean way,
yes.
is, I think, the best prescription for understanding between you.
30% of people in marriages feel lonely. That's a well-known
Yes, indeed.
statistic, right? Might be more. And I think
Okay.
one of the reasons might be that people don't feel understood.
I think that is probably true. And I think corollaries or underlying things are I don't feel heard. I don't feel seen.
I
So
don't
how
feel,
could I possibly be understood?
yeah, I don't feel loved. If I don't feel heard, understood, it starts with being listened to, but listened to is only the first step.
Yes.
The key is someone gets you, you know?
Absolutely. Dr. Siegel said that. And that has been my number one thing I've just pinned onto my everyday t-shirt, which is everybody wants somebody to get them,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Everyone.
And that's why I
And
think people are struggling so much with their relationships now, especially with the dating and all of that. 40% of the people in the world live alone at the moment. And I
I
think,
did not know that number,
yeah,
but
yeah, it's very well
makes sense
known.
to me.
But and I think one of the reasons relationships struggle is because people are looking and continue to look for someone who gets them, who really
Yes,
understands them. And I think,
agreed.
yeah, it's a deep human need we have. But we have a
Absolutely.
need to
And
be,
as we,
but not to understand. St. Francis of Assisi, right? To be
yeah,
listened to, but not to listen, and so on.
indeed. Well, I was just going to say about that relational aspect of us living alone more and more because we don't know how to interact. That's a whole nother conversation we could have. But often, um, colleagues, friends, partnerships, marriages, we grow differentially, or someone isn't apparently growing much at all, and someone is growing quite a bit,
Hmm.
right? So we leave the getting. We used to get each other, but we're not the same people anymore. And another thing I want to just throw on the table is from the famous Gottman family. One of the most impactful thing I think I ever learned from them was when you feel dismissed, disrespected, or disgust
Hmm.
coming off a person talking to you, it's
Hmm.
crushing.
Hmm.
And no understanding can be made because you have effectively shut them down, scared them, or made it clear
Yes,
that
yes,
you have no value.
yes. And I think also in understanding, there are two other things I'm always looking for. What are they feeling? Not just
Mm,
the words, but what's the feeling?
right?
Or what hurt might they be carrying?
Mm,
What's their past conditioning? What hurt might people be carrying? Because that informs our interaction, how people are showing up, and all of those things. So it requires so much sensitivity and intelligence, right? Communication. Okay, my next question is, why does communication need courage? And when
mm.
is courage required?
How wonderful is that as a question? I think much more often than we think,
Mm, mm,
right? And
mm,
if we're going to engage, I mean, some of us have jobs where we need to develop that, and some of us have, let's call it a role in public where we
mm.
need to develop that. But let's just talk to the everyday client kind of person. The courage comes in when you feel the need, there's your feel word, you feel the need to either disagree or to check on, right, more deeply than you've been allowed, or you need to defend yourself, your children, others. So I would say that that's like my top trio of where courage might be needed in, let's call it everyday courage.
Yes.
Right?
For me, there are three scenarios where it's very important. One is to share what I'm really feeling with
Mhm,
you.
mhm,
You know, so I'm feeling things are not going well. I'm anxious, and I want to hide that. I'm ashamed of that in a way, you know. A grown man, I shouldn't be feeling these things, so I'm hiding that. But I know that by sharing, I'm
Mm.
honoring our relationship and our friendship. Because what is a friendship if we just talk about the weather and not our deepest feelings?
Not a friendship.
It's building deeper connections because I know sharing my heart deepens our connection. And it
Get
helps
it.
me make sense of what's happening in my own heart, right? And
Mhm.
mind. Because now the other area is, and I realized it's both requires courage and kindness, is to say, John Lee, this is not working in our relationship. I'm
Mhm.
really unhappy. Because if I say it early enough,
Mhm.
then it doesn't erode the relationship long term.
Mhm.
I know a friend of mine who's got four brothers and sisters who live within half an hour's drive, and he doesn't speak to any of them because something happened that upset him, and he was didn't have the courage to share it, just
Mhm.
withdrew, and then that's been their relationship ever since. You know, and it's so
Right.
common, right? When we get hurt, we don't communicate.
Completely. Estrangement is very common. Right.
We need courage for that. And I think lastly, we need courage to stand up to bullying and abuse. It's
Mhm.
so common, right? In workplaces,
I,
relationships, everywhere, you know.
I'm just going to reflect back on what you said. That courage was about being vulnerable, right?
Yes,
Being vulnerable to be known,
yes,
to be better understood, to be
yes,
gotten.
yes, yes.
Right?
Of course, you got to pick your relationships, but I think people underestimate the importance of courage
Mhm.
and why it's so important. Okay, what about
Well,
kindness? Sorry, go on, Johnny, go on. You want to add something there?
because kindness is one of my favorites. But let's just go back for a minute about the courage part. And I just want to say that kind of courage in communication and revealing of the vulnerability or the real you, that demands a lot of you that you know yourself, right? You really know who you are, what you need, what you're seeking, and you can share that. And the courage to become self-aware is something I would add to your list.
Yes. But sometimes you only get to know who you are by sharing. You know what I mean? It's only
Or who
in
you're not,
those
right?
it's only in that sharing, deepest sharing, that it comes
Mhm.
out of you and it's no longer unconscious in you, it becomes conscious, visible to you. So it's
Agreed.
a way of almost discovering yourself, you know, that depth of communication and sharing, you know, and so on, right? Okay. Let's go on to your favorite subject. Why is kindness in communication important? Let's talk of a few examples.
Well, let's do silly ones so it's easy to enter. Everyone has a joke in their culture somewhere of never ask your wife, does this look good on me?
Mm.
Right? Or
Yes, yes.
does this make my butt look fat or something like that? There is there is a lot of studied kindness in saying, well, I like the blue dress better because it is kinder and it will probably avoid an argument or someone getting their feelings hurt,
You're right.
right? So this is just an easy entry point.
Yes.
But when it comes to things that, let's call it matter, I think kindness is always a choice. We just rarely are taught that's a conscious choice.
Kindness
It
is a
gets back
conscious
again
choice.
to that intention, does it not?
Yes, yes, because otherwise conversations are unconscious, automatic,
Mhm.
right? But choosing
And
kindness, and for me, sometimes it means not saying anything, even though I've got something critical at the tip of my tongue.
right?
You know, I'll just listen. I won't say anything because I want to respect. Kindness is respect, right?
Yes.
Respecting choices,
I was going to say it's
that
care. Kindness is a type of care.
yes. Kindness is also acceptance of opinions, beliefs that are different to your own, you know?
Mhm.
Uh,
I think so. And in that way, I think you're using kindness to become more open to holding opinions that are not yours, just in respect for the other person.
yes. And also, I think goes back to that first question: how can I support you better right now?
Mhm.
You remember you had that nuance, and I learned this from you, John D. You want to say that, like, how can I help you often triggers people, but how can I support you lands
Mhm.
better, right?
Does, right? I learned that from working with veterans and first responders who basically said in unkind ways, but certainly instructive one, said,
Mm.
you don't get to help us. We're the helpers.
Yes, support is a better word.
Oh.
Yeah, and
So
also
in
the
that
other one,
moment,
which is
I will.
I know it must be hard for you.
Hmm.
That doesn't land very well because nobody thinks you know, but you said that sounds hard
Sounds
and
hard.
that lands better. Do you know what I mean? Subtle
Yes,
things, right? But they're just
they are.
these
They
nuances.
are. But I do think all of those are possible and easily to anyone who chooses. I'm going to see what feels kind or
Yes,
kinder,
yes,
and I really want to do that for them. It is a gift.
yes, yes. Okay. And I think sometimes being honest is the kindest thing, especially in a relationship. Say you're dating somebody and it's not working out. But some
Mhm.
people, because they don't want to confront things, they let it drag on, sometimes for years, John D.
Oh yeah.
Whereas if
Well,
you just
and
said someone right at the beginning, look, it's not working out. It's hard, but it's so much kinder, right?
it is, and that one travels with courage. If you have the courage to tell them the truth.
Yes.
You don't have to have courage to be honest without kindness. They can travel together very, very well. But that is conscious action, consciously learned skill set, perhaps for some. But think about it. What's kind? It's not kind to drag them on, to shine them on, to lead them on, to
Yes.
manipulate them. That's not kind, right?
Yeah.
And I want to speak to this because how many times have you been told, well, I'm just being honest? But they're not just being honest. They're being cutting. They're being
Mm,
manipulative. They're being unkind.
yes.
And that too is a choice.
That too is a choice. So it requires real intelligence. There's no formula for kindness, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Johnny, I'm going to pause here because I realize we've been, talking for a bit.
Rabbiting
So
on.
rabbiting on. That was okay. So I'm going to open it for my our friends who've joined us today. So Eli, what do you have to add or offer on communication?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot that's already been said. There's a certain emphasis, there's a certain thought in terms of empathy that
Mm,
comes to me that I think is also, really important that, to kind of touch on what was discussed earlier about why we're so, sometimes we kind of get lost dominating the conversation and not really listening. And just that alone also brings a thought of as a child. I've always been told you have two ears and one mouth. So two ears for listening, only one mouth for talking. So it should be used in that kind of proportion. But often you get lost in that, and why do you tend to dominate the conversation and hear yourself talk is people sometimes lack the empathy of, who it is they're talking to on the other side and trying to hear their perspective a little bit more. So having more of that awareness internally and taking that empathetic approach will help in using the ears and mouth proportionally as they're intended to be.
okay. So empathy. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean by or what you understand by empathy or empathy in action.
Well, and empathy is at its root is really trying to understand a little bit better where the person's coming from. You feel what it is they're going through, whether in a celebratory manner or in a sad state or difficult state that the other person might be going to. So you think you understand what they're going through, but then when you allow them to speak, you hear them more than you truly get it. You truly understand why that celebration is that big a deal. Sometimes it's easy to kind of poo-poo someone. It's a birthday, what's a big deal? And you kind of hear a little bit more about what they've kind of been going through, that year and achieving that milestone. Everyone has a birthday, sure, but this one kind of means more, and here's why. it could have been just coming off a difficult year. It could have been, maybe a parent maybe didn't live to that age and you've now kind of surpassed that age. And that's something that might have been, weighing on you, and it brings back memories of that. So there's so many different ways that can be. So while you think you understand the other person, hearing from them, and using that empathy could be so important. And, same obviously can be said, for difficult circumstances if someone's going through, hardship or the like.
You said something really important, I think, which is we ascribe our value system to other people, don't we? Like, I don't regard birthdays as important, for example, it might be. So I think,
Here,
why are
yeah,
people making a big fuss? Why is someone making, and so on. But empathy is putting yourself in their shoes and saying, hey, okay, for you, it's a big deal. I'll go along with that, or whatever, right? Cool. Thank you. Precious, what, you got anything to add to that or to offer?
Yes, this was so rich. I have a lot of notes, but I'm just going to use my one word right now. I think of how trust is so critical because we
Uh-huh.
automatically can misinterpret. I mean, my undergraduate is in communication, and I'm so humbled when I still mess up. It's like, I have that degree, but I'm still a work in progress. But when I trust a person to mean me well and not harm, even when something comes up that I might say, I don't know, I'm less prone to be defensive. And I think the other way around. So if you trust me, because there are certain buzzwords, I'm not going to say them now, but based on the polarization of it for different people, it means something. Your alarm goes off, and someone else is like, "What's the big deal?"
Yes, yes.
But
Yeah.
if you trust me, you don't think that I mean you harm. You are more prone to listen to me, and vice versa. And I'll say this: I think listening, like truly from the space of truth telling and connection. I read this somewhere that it just makes sense. It's so much like love. People confuse the two because it's love when you choose to do that for a person. I'll be quiet, but it's so rich for me. I love it.
No, it's so beautiful. Thank you for that. I think you said something really interesting that, when we get triggered in really close relationships and we start getting angry, just to remind ourselves, this is a loving relationship. We trust each other. This person doesn't mean me harm. And just remind yourself of that, right? So that then your whole reactivity, changes, right? So this is so important, Precious. And of course, Paul Illich said the first duty of love is to listen. And love is listening, right?
Absolutely.
It's not
Can I say
flowers
this?
and all that, right? It's listening.
Absolutely. And can I say this too? When you mentioned you in the conversation about courage to speak, I think what goes with it is also safety. There are times I am not safe to share with
Mm,
this particular person in this way.
mm,
So I have, because I've been taught that, because if you dismiss me, whatever the role may be, because of their own personal situations, even with children, they can be more prone to tell lies if they feel like if I tell you the truth, I'm scared of the consequences. So we do self protect. And sometimes that's wise. So courage, true, but also safety is so critical in that as well.
So, John D, I want you to come in on that and explore a little bit more about the importance of creating a space of safety for people in our relationships to open up and share their heart, right? Unless we create the conditions of safety, people are not going to have the courage to open up. Children, for example.
Absolutely. I think well said, and thank you very much, both of you. Um, I truly preached this for I don't know how long when I was lucky enough to work with more children. Trust is earned.
Mm,
Safety is also earned. And you can help both those things along. That doesn't mean you can force them to give it to you, but you can help by creating safety and repeating that creation. And that becomes a condition
yeah,
of I am safe with you, right?
yeah, yeah.
And from there, trust can grow, but it is experiential and it's stacked up. It's not just your neurobiology, it's your neuroemotional resource. I want to say bank account. that you are drawing from or giving back and forth, you learn if you are safe, if you can trust. So
People
it's up
get
to
a
us to create
sense
that
of,
container.
yeah, people get a sense of whether you're interested in them, you know. They get a
Absolutely.
sense of whether you're interested in what they have to say. So if you
Absolutely.
don't create that space,
Mhm.
people are not going to open up. I know that I often will just not say anything because what's the point? I know this person has zero interest in listening. Why should I bother? You know, kind of
Mhm.
thing. So,
Fair.
yeah, I think it's so important, as you said, Precious, to create that sense not only of safety, but also of intention. I'm interested in you to listen what you have to say, whether you're a manager or a husband, wife, father, whatever.
Or a parent.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
saying you're important. What you say is important, and it's important to me that I give you that space, hear you, see you, or not. I used to get in trouble all the time by my friends or my husband because I would see children traveling with parents going to and from daycare and school and stuff like that. And the child would really be trying to communicate to the parent, and the parent would be going,
Yeah, all that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. On
mm,
the phone all
mm,
the time.
mm. And I mean, all that said to me was, you are not important.
Yes, yes. Brenda, you had so many years in corporate life. What have you learned about communication?
I think I was very blessed to be in the right places at the right time. But in fact, today I had done my post was just this, that in the future, after AI has taken away your creativity, your innovation, your ability to decide, like everything, that it is then really what remains for the future is one or two things: your curiosity to, to get to know people better. And I think also your openness to different perspectives, your openness to check whether what is saying is right or wrong. And your executive presence, which I think, AI cannot replicate. A real conversation, an AI cannot replicate. It can replicate everything. It can replicate the networkings, the connections and all that. But the real heart-to-heart conversations, AI cannot replicate. And I think that's where, the future lies, with the people who will sort of win or stand out in future will be people who have built these skills, like we say, curiosity. I'm very curious by nature. I mean, I'm just curious. That's my DNA. But even if I were not, I could learn to be more curious and want to be more curious about how other people think, be open-minded, and see how decisions are being made. And I think a lot of leadership problems, and the reason why we have toxic leaders, is simply because they have these certain sort of built-in ideas which have come from their childhood, and they're not even aware of it.
Yes, yeah.
And
Well, we all have
that's
that. Yes, yes. So important.
so.
Thank you.
And I think listening, of course, is, you can pretend to listen, but people know very well from your facial expressions, etc., whether you are interested or not. That comes through. Children also know, they understand very easily. And also, I like this idea that, we do this sometimes, we are speaking to relieve our own anxiety.
Correct.
And another thing which came to me today, actually, when I was going through, the posts, etc., was when I'm conversing with another, my own consciousness is being expanded. So my own self-awareness, in fact, is growing. It's not just interest in the other, but, a sort of brownie point that comes through. That's what I have really found, that my own awareness comes.
Well, thank you for reminding us, Brenda, that self-awareness is the foundation of all great communication. And you use the word presence. And I think for me, presence in another person is when they're really listening, when they're
It's not the
really,
outward look. It's not the first impression. It's the values that people see in you. When you enter a room, you just make a presence, but it's
yeah, yeah.
not really your dress or your appearance. It's the values that come through when people actually see you through your smile, your contact, your handshake, whatever. And it's also the way you behave with your subordinates, maybe before you even come into the room, and how you treat people who you think, how you behave when others are not in the room, and how you treat your subordinates.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, you're a counselor, therapist in your own right. What have you learned about communication? And you're a
Gosh, there's
teacher
not a
and
lot
so many things.
left.
So many things, right?
I could pick on so many things, really. I think following on from what Brenda said, that presence, being fully present is probably at the heart of it for me. When you can communicate with another person, I am here, I am fully available. And if you can communicate that with your body and with your face and with your whole being, and it's about being more than doing. We've touched on it, slowing down to not rush to fix, to not rush to tell people what you think, to
Yes.
really focus on the listening and the allowing of what needs to emerge in the space, slowing everything down and really just creating those conditions for the what needs to emerge from that space.
Yes.
Which is not always easy in some situations. It's much more easy when it's a one-to-one, I think.
Yes.
When you're in a big room full of people, like I am sometimes in a classroom with lots of kids, and it's much more difficult to be that. But I think the word presence, I think that's probably the word that's come out of this the most for me, is being fully present and interested and curious.
Curious, yes. Do you think feeling listened to is a kind of healing, Suzanne? Does it?
I mean that this has been said in this space as well, that the thing probably that I encounter the most is other people wanting to be heard, the need to be heard, the need to be witnessed by another. The need to be valued by others is such an intrinsic part of being human, isn't it?
Accepted, I think, is the other one, right?
Yeah,
I need to be accepted for me because it validates then, everything.
Yeah.
I found that so many times when I was working as a surgeon and I couldn't help people, I'd say, I'm sorry, but they said, I felt listened to for the first time, without interrupting. And, that itself carries some healing, right? Because these poor patients been wandering around the country feeling nobody's actually hearing them, or listening to them. And the extent of their suffering, all that, right? Yes.
Sometimes we don't need to say anything at all, do we? We just need to fully be with all of what that means. Fully be fully available to the other, to hear them and to receive them.
And I think the key element to that is having a quiet mind in ourselves, because our mind otherwise is noisy and reactive, and we always want to interrupt and suggest and fix and all of that. So Jondi, we're at the top of the hour and time to start closing this conversation down, because we could talk forever about communication. But isn't it such a beautiful skill that we should all learn, right?
I do. I think it's what helps us continue to evolve into our fuller self, is all that we learn from adopting all these beautiful principles that we've been talking about. And I guess I do consider them principles rather than concepts. But at the decision to be open, I really wanted to push that again. It means I can hear, I'll be able to hear you. I'll probably be able to consider what you said. I might be inclined to explore that with you, but I am open. And it all reflects back to me in a very positive way, actually. The big picture, anyway. I learn something new about you, about life, about myself. The regulate before we relate is incredibly important, I think, especially in these days and times. And I just want to reiterate that we can't always, in that moment, determine what's going to happen and show up as our best self. That's not going to happen. But we can certainly prepare ourselves for the things that we do know about. I'm going to have a difficult financial conversation. I'm going to have a difficult assessment. I'm going to have to face a difficult test or testimonial, right? I have the ability to see that coming and show up as my best regulated self, because that's when, much like the Chinese symbol of yin yang, right? I am in balance
Yes.
with myself. Everything is whole. From what we've been talking about, that development of presence, which I just love that every one of us are on that tip, that development of presence is also, in my mind, somehow aligned with the word wholeness, right?
Mhm.
All of me is here now.
Yes, yes.
And that is the respect and love that we are giving that person in that time, and nowhere more important probably than with
Yes.
children.
Yes.
I think Manoj, remember we talked about this too, listening to understand, not win.
Yes, yes, yes. Listening to understand.
Mhm. Yeah.
And as Suzanne said, listening to grow our consciousness, right? We're growing, we're learning. Okay. So many rich things from this conversation, but my key takeaways are this is a skill we need to work on every day, all of us. And it should be taught in schools from day one, all the different nuances of it, right? Because if you look in society, so many of the problems we have begin because of a lack of the skill. And so many successful people are successful because they are great communicators, you know. But listening with a quiet mind, I think that's really important for me. Understanding not just the words, but everything beyond the words, the intention, the feelings, all of that. And then watching out for your self-interest operating in the background. So it doesn't do what you don't intend it to do. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't corrupt your intention, right?
I think ownership is a really great way to express some of
Beautiful.
this.
Yes, that's a good word.
Take ownership of your evolvedness, right? But
Yes.
also what you say. And
Yeah.
all of us are going to say something not quite right, not quite good, not quite kind. Ownership
Yes.
goes a long way to developing what Precious and I were talking about, that trust, that safety.
And as Brenda said, self-awareness is the key. But self-awareness isn't a one-time, you've learned it and you forget it. It's a daily practice, really. And you can only get better and better as time goes on. So, okay, it's been such a beautiful conversation. John D., thank you. And thank you to Precious, Eli, Brenda, Suzanne, and our other guests from around the world. Thank you.